Welcome to the Dibley Diaries for this week. I've had a couple of weeks off. I'd had a really bad cold and cough, so I've not been able to record anything, but I'm back now, and this weekend where I'm working we are celebrating Harvest Festival. And as I've been thinking about it this week, making preparations for it, I've been really thinking about the traditions that surround harvest festivals, especially in our rural churches. Now, Harvest Festival as we know it, with like the church decorated and people bringing produce and singing harvest hymns, is not a very old tradition. There's always been a tradition of having harvest suppers and harvest homes, all those sorts of things, but the Harvest Festival in church as we know it is only from about 1843, that's the first kind of recorded one. So it's not an old tradition, and yet people are fiercely attached to it as a tradition, and they have all sorts of things that there's expectations about. People have expectations about a harvest loaf. Who makes the harvest loaf? What sort of harvest loaf is it? Is it a sheafy one? Is it a cottage one? What happens to it after the service? I had a conversation with someone a few weeks ago where they were saying that they never ever went back to a church community after somebody they thought who shouldn't have took the harvest loaf home themselves and ate it. They didn't even say what they would have rather have happened to the harvest loaf, and I thought that was quite an extreme response, but I was really curious about it. But it does really highlight what I've been really thinking about harvest this week. So Harvest Festival happens once a year, so traditions about it are long-standing. People are keen to do it in the same way that they did it when they were children, if they are locals, if they have always lived in a particular place. But it sets us that challenge, doesn't it? The challenge of thinking about, is that thing which we have done for X number of years, but not before 1843, is that thing a helpful thing? Is it a useful thing for us to be doing? Is it important for us to do it? I think this is a really valuable question to apply to a lot of our ministry in rural places. We have done this. This has served us well in the past. Is this still serving us well? And will it serve us well in the future? Whatever that thing is, whether it's how you do your harvest festival, who you give your harvest gifts to, how that works. And there's actually been quite a lot of tension about that in churches where I've worked. How is that useful to us? Is it useful for us to remind us about God and being a Christian community, or is it no longer useful for us? Should we stop doing it? So just a caveat with harvest festivals. What are we doing? Why are we doing it? And this applies to all of the things that we do, actually, especially in rural communities. Are we doing it just because we've always done it, or are we doing it because it has been and remains a really useful way of us understanding what it means to be a Christian and to be living in a Christian community? This week's thought for the week is about generosity and thankfulness in harvest festivals, and it has become this kind of double-sided thing for us as we think about harvest. There's a huge amount of thankfulness, but there's also become this culture of generosity. This culture of generosity that we have so much from the harvest that we should be generously doing something with it. The two readings that we have set for us for harvest this year are from Deuteronomy 26, which is instructions about the harvest and what you should present to God when you have a good harvest. What are you offering to God when you have a good harvest? And that harks back, doesn't it, to the Cain and Abel stories. It has echoes of the issues about farming versus hunter-gathering, which particularly from the Europe and the Middle East were then and have been true throughout the millennia, actually in other places in the world, right through to now, actually, really. And so there's that kind of thankfulness, thankful for the harvest, for what's happening. You need farming, to have a harvest in the kind of way that we have maybe been thinking about it in England for centuries, but there's an opportunity for thankfulness in other ways. So this balance of thankfulness and generosity is what we're always being encouraged to think about at harvest time. And the gospel reading that we have is John 6, where he's talking about saying, I am the bread of life. But interestingly, in that passage, people begin that debate by asking him, what should we do? What should we do to be God's followers, essentially? That's the question that they're asking. So Jesus talks about, I am the bread of life, and that's a really interesting thing for him to say in the context of Harvest Festival as well. In our schools this past week, and actually this whole term, we're thinking about generosity as our value for this term. What does it mean to be generous? And we have particularly been thinking just last week about what does it mean to be a cheerful giver? What does it mean to be a cheerful giver? And I've been really thinking about this, and we've looked at the story of Tabitha this week, and we've asked who was a cheerful giver in that context, who was doing what. So we've asked those questions, along with the questions of what's the best thing that you have ever been given, and what's the best thing that you have ever given to someone else. What's the best thing that you've ever been given, and what's the best thing that you have ever given to somebody else? So we've had answers as the best gift they've ever received, varied from a kind of a phone amongst some of the older children, a Nintendo Switch, down to my family, my friends. How do you give good things? People talked about giving love, about giving things that gifts of time, so doing the washing up, being kind, those sorts of things as well. And something's been puzzling me at the back of my mind all week, because I think being a cheerful giver is something more than just following instructions. I think it is part of the essence of being a Christian. And I was thinking about Jesus saying, I am the bread of life. Well, there are other I am sayings. And there's a kind of understanding that when Jesus says I am, that he says also you are. It's most explicit when he says I am the light of the world. And then he says you are the light of the world. But tied in with that is the whole theology that we have, that whilst we are Christians here in the world, we are the body of Christ. We are the body of Christ. So our generosity and our listening to Jesus saying, I am the bread of life, gives us those questions about how, when we are giving things to other people, how when we are being generous, both as individual Christians and as church communities, how is that showing and living in our church communities and our wider communities, living God's generosity? We are mirroring God's generosity to the world, God's huge unorthodox generosity to the world by our actions. And so actually us being generous is an incarnation of our faith and our belief. It's really important. So it's not just being kind and helpful in perhaps an old-fashioned Sunday school sort of way. It's to do with being the body of Christ here on earth, to do with our vocation to be that here on earth. The Dibley moment of the week this week is something which happened to me when I was leaving a parish. I had inherited a car from my dad, which was really old and tiny and just about went. It was reliable, but it wasn't a great car. I drove it for quite a while. Then when we were moving, I realised that we wouldn't need it anymore. And so I offered to give it, in fact we did give it, to someone in the village who was a priest who would then be able to use it to go to other services. Had the conversation between myself, one of my friends and the Archdeacon, and the Archdeacon said, well, how is this person going to get to the other parishes to do these services that he's covering? And I went, oh no, I've given him a car. And the Archdeacon went, that's so generous. And my friend went, no, you should have seen the car. And I thought, that's so tricky, but so true. Absolutely fair enough. Well, that's it for the Dibley Diaries for this week. I pray that you and your village, however large or small, have a really blessed week where you can be thankful and generous.